As discussed in the College and Career Readiness Model, one of the main implementation elements is multi-tiered instruction and intervention. We wanted to take a moment and share with you why multi-tiered instruction and intervention is an important concept for preparing students to be college and career ready. A multi-tiered system of supports allows us as educators to capitalize on the tool bag we all carry and tailor these tools to the students that need each support the most. Multi-tiered system of supports is not a simple concept, especially when considering the instruction and interventions for developing students' college and career readiness competencies, i.e., cognitive, intrapersonal, and interpersonal domains. First, let's talk about Tier 1, or in better terms, the supports and instructions that are provided to all students. Now, here's the confusing part for many. All students does not mean we are shifting our focus away from special education students to general education students. Rather, we want to make sure that all students, including students with an IEP, whether receiving instruction in a self-contained or general education setting, will receive what they need to successfully transition to adult life, i.e., be lifelong learners, career equipped, and socially and emotionally engaged. Consider all the students that your school supports that have IEPs. Think about the percentage of students that have significant disabilities and where and how they are supported. Then consider students with learning disabilities or ADHD, likely your largest group of students with disabilities. Where and how are they supported? It is likely that this large group of students is supported primarily in the general education classroom. For example, in order to support all students with IEPs in building interpersonal skills, such as self-reflection, tenacity, and self-monitoring, instruction would need to be provided beyond the individualized and small group setting to reach all students with disabilities. To reach students that are fully included, instruction would need to be offered within and as part of the course content. So what is an example of a Tier 1 support? One example would be all ninth graders completing a career interest profile and researching 3 potential career paths of interest. Another example would be a futures fair, where all 11th graders tried to pay monthly expenses based on the entry-level salary in their chosen career. Local businesses sold cell phone plans, financed cars, and provided housing to rent or buy. Students quickly learned that money must be spent frugally and needs must be addressed before luxuries. Every 11th grader participated. Finally, another example would be all math classes required students with and without IEPs to graph their own performance on each unit test and reflect on study habits that supported or hindered their performance. Now, it should be noted that Tier 1 really does refer to all students, so content provided in electives or by related services often cannot be considered as supporting all students. For example, a unit on writing a resume and cover letter in 10th grade language arts offered by only one of the 4 10th grade language arts teachers. This support is not Tier 1, but would be if it was offered by all 10th grade language arts teachers. Another non-example would be a lesson on post-secondary goal setting provided by the school guidance counselor. It could be a Tier 1 support, but once again, it must be provided to all students. Now you might be thinking, I get the idea, but students with disabilities are often excluded from these experiences. This is an immediate issue that should be addressed. Why would any student be excluded from essential learning in high school? What accommodations or modifications could enable all students to participate in and benefit from the experiences? How can the Tier 1 support incorporate universal design principles to make the learning accessible to all students? We intentionally use the term all students and not the core curriculum when describing Tier 1. While the core curriculum is considered a Tier 1 support, Tier 1 supports are not limited to the core curriculum, and more intensive support, Tiers 2 and 3, can be provided within the general education core classroom. Also, if some students are excluded from the core curriculum, then educators must figure out how to provide Tier 1 supports to these students, either by including them in the general education classroom or aligning supports that are provided in less inclusive environments with the core content. If you are a special educator, you may feel like you have no influence over what happens in the general education classroom. But it's important to note that when we provide supports in Tier 1, we support students with disabilities. Additionally, the supports benefit all students in the classroom, not just those with a disability. As we support students to be college and career ready, students both with and without disabilities gain competencies in cognition, intrapersonal, and interpersonal domains. Now let's move on to Tier 2. This level represents supplemental instruction for students that are not able to be successful or master the content through Tier 1 support only. The key to this level is supplemental. You don't take a vitamin supplement in place of eating dinner. You take the supplement in addition to eating dinner. Now, if you eat a healthy dinner, you're less likely to require a vitamin supplement. This holds true in education. If you have a strong Tier 1 system of supports, students are less likely to require supplemental instruction. Tier 2 is comprised of the Tier 1 supports plus timely, targeted instruction for students needing additional instructional supports. So what is a Tier 2 supplemental support? The primary question to ask here is, how do you support students that don't master the skills through Tier 1 supports? Here are a few examples of Tier 2 supports. An elective course on financial literacy provides more intensive instruction for students that could not master money management through the Tier 1 experiences. In the 10th grade language arts course, if some students were not proficient at writing a cover letter, supplemental instruction is provided, while those that demonstrated proficiency complete enrichment activities, such as interviewing employers about the characteristics they look for in a resume and cover letter. In this example, the tier support is provided in the general education core classroom. The same supplemental instruction on writing a cover letter could be provided during a seminar period or small group tutoring after school. In this example, the Tier 2 supports is provided outside the general education core classroom. To summarize, in Tier 2, students that are struggling to make progress with Tier 1 supports and instruction alone are provided with additional supports targeting specific areas of need. Often, this supplemental instruction is provided in small groups, often in the general education classroom. Finally, there is the Tier 3 level. At this tier, students receive intensive individualized supports, typically provided through one-to-one instruction and personalized experiences. While receiving Tier 1 and then Tier 2 supports and targeted instruction, some students may demonstrate a unique and specialized need for intensive supports. For students continuing to struggle despite Tier 2 support, more individually focused problem solving is required. Individualized, evidence-based interventions, in addition to monitoring progress, are characteristic of Tier 3 supports. Have you noticed that I haven't mentioned a tier for students with disabilities yet? Well, Tier 3 is not it. Students with disabilities, like all students, should be provided with supports based on their level of need. Not all students with disabilities require Tier 2 or Tier 3 support, and few, if any, students require Tier 3 support in all college and career readiness areas. For example, consider a student with a learning disability in reading. He needs Tier 1 supports provided in the general education language arts course, but he may also need supplemental instruction in reading provided through an elective course such as Read 180. He may even need intensive, individualized Tier 3 reading support designed to meet his specific reading challenges. But when it comes to financial literacy, this student may master the competencies through Tier 1 support only. Hopefully, you now have an understanding of the concept of a multi-tiered system of supports. To summarize, as students demonstrate differing responsiveness to the instruction in cognitive, intrapersonal, and interpersonal competencies, and consequently exhibit differing levels of need, the intensity of supports increases or decreases. Student movement between tiers of support should be seamless, with decisions regarding levels of needed supports based upon data. Students with disabilities, English language learners, and students at risk of dropping out are present in all three tiers as they receive supports based primarily on need, and this can vary across content. As we mentioned, multi-tiered systems of support are a challenging concept. Test your knowledge with this quick true-false quiz. Students with disabilities only receive Tier 3 support. False. Students with disabilities are supported in the tiers based on need. Some students with disabilities fare very well with Tier 1 supports and never access other levels of supports. Other students with the most intensive needs often access supports from all three tiers. Furthermore, rarely do individuals with disabilities require the same level of support across all college and career readiness competencies, i.e., cognitive, intrapersonal, and interpersonal. More frequently, needs vary across competency domains. Students who are at risk of school failure belong in Tier 2. False. Students at risk of school failure likely will receive some Tier 2 targeted supports, but no student belongs or is assigned to a tier. Tiered support should be provided based upon data illustrating need. Furthermore, when needs decrease, as illustrated by data, students move into less intensive supports. Multi-tiered supports could be considered a special education initiative. True. Multi-tiered supports aim to support all students, with and without disabilities, through evidence-based instruction and supports. To this end, general and special educators, administrators, school counselors, related service providers, career technical educators, and other professional education staff work together closely to create a system that provides the appropriate level of support to each student. Developing this system takes time and collaboration and begins with individual teachers implementing instruction and supports and getting buy-in from other educators. This cannot be accomplished with general education and special education working in isolation. It is no longer your kids and my kids. Simply put, it's our kids. Together, we can help every student become a career-equipped, lifelong learner who is socially and emotionally engaged.